Welcome back to Beyond the Headline, everyone. It's a very exciting day to be on the show because I'm here with the co-founder and CEO of Amino, David Vivero. David, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
I want to start out with a very simple question that I actually don't love to start interviews with, but I think it's so fit for what you guys are doing. What makes Amino different?
Amino is different for two reasons. Amino's goal is to give everyone the clearest picture of their healthcare choices. And I think everyone acknowledges the problem in healthcare around a consumer's experience, that we're increasingly being asked to shell out more in our deductibles. We're more often than not having to choose a new doctor because our network is changing. We're having to pick insurance plans. So everyone agrees that being a consumer in healthcare is painful. What makes Amino different is that we're using data to solve the problem. And so we have organized and put together an unprecedented data set about the experiences that 188 million people have had as they've gone to see the doctor. We use that information to profile the way that a doctor practices so that if you have any of 1,000 needs that we support at amino.com, that you can be able to find someone who is best suited to your needs. So the first reason that we're different is because of that data, which allows us to talk in terms of facts and unbiased information. The second reason that we're different is that we're available for free on amino.com without the effect of advertising or sponsored listings or anything that would say that we're not acting in the best interests of our consumer patient users. And so we focus entirely on trying to make sure that the information that we provide on Amino is based in facts and that you're not distracted by blinking lights or drug ads or things like that that might alter the experience in any way that would make you get less than the best care for yourself.
Something that really stuck out to me when you introduced this in your blog post on Medium was that when you were making a personal healthcare decision, you felt like it was a shot in the dark. And when we're making healthcare decisions, that is not how it should feel.
That's right. Healthcare is obviously one of the largest ways that Americans spend money. Not only that, it's one of the most important decisions that each of us is going to make in terms of our own lives, maybe our parents' lives or our young children. And so what's astonishing about healthcare is that we remain in the dark, as I said. I founded Amino because I was leaving Zillow, the real estate marketplace. And effectively, while my seat was still warm at Zillow, I had this experience of choosing between COBRA, which is that health insurance that's continuing after you leave an employer, and being individually insured. I applied for health insurance. I was denied because of a pre-existing condition. This was in 2013. I had to pick a new doctor, and I went through this tour of the U.S. healthcare system and realized that while I had an MBA, while I had spent a whole bunch of time thinking about analytics and opening up data in the real estate world, I was completely in the dark, as you said, in healthcare. And to be able to contrast something that we spend as much money on and where the impact is as emotional, as physical as healthcare, and to not have that information, I acknowledged and knew that there was something to be done here. It just took 18 months to 2 years for us to actually establish and break through to give information to people that has been locked away for a very long time.
One of the things that you guys point out, and I know you're very dedicated to, is making Amino usable. Can you describe what that means?
Well, we only make healthcare decisions every so often, and we're not the most expert in how to do that when we're acting as consumers. We're put in the driver's seat, trying to figure out where to get mom, care for her hip, or how to deal with a sudden acknowledgement that one of us or someone we love has cancer. And those are moments that you're interacting with an interface for the very first time. And so the burden is incredibly high for someone like Amino to be able to take a conversation like that, or a research process that might take months, or data that we're not used to seeing, and make that something that with just a few taps of your thumb, you can come to a conclusion about where to get care and how to make a good decision. And so it starts absolutely with trying to sort of amass information that would be useful to people, but that by no means is the end. We are put in a position in healthcare to make very important decisions, and that dashboard that we're given has as much of an impact as the underlying information. And so my co-founders at Amino, which is unusual in healthcare, come from a user experience and design background. And I think if you or any of your listeners or viewers use amino.com, you'll recognize a stark difference between how we've approached this problem of finding a physician and finding care and how people are sadly used to when they go to their health insurance directory or when they go to other websites on the internet. So our approach has done to do two things. One is to make it highly personalized. So if you go to Amino, we give you this unique deck of cards when you use Amino, which allows you, using your thumb, to search for a given topic like ADHD or Crohn's disease. It allows you to tell us where you live and how far away you're willing to travel, what your insurance is, but it feels like answering an interview with a trusted friend. And then we use a bunch of really interesting visualizations to communicate the underlying information about Amino so that your experience, even though it's based on this data set of 4 billion health insurance claims and 188 million people's experiences, it feels like it's an experience that was just made up specifically for you.
And I shared with you before, when I first learned about Amino, I thought, let me try this. And I put in something that's very specific and was wowed. And it goes back to what you were saying both about your co-founders and your intern. Zoe wrote a great post about this, the role that design plays in that wow factor for me.
Yeah, first it's meaningful to hear that story. Our goal is absolutely for people to leave Amino feeling confident and feeling wowed. And so, all too often we're in a position where we are promised certain information. We go to the research. We try to read papers. We call around, and we've got legal pads full of information that we are trying to scramble through to try and find the right choice for ourselves or a loved one. And so design is incredibly important for something like Amino and has become a pillar because our goal is, without having to fill up a legal pad information, for someone to feel as informed and as trusting as doing the research themselves. And so a big part of what we do is trying to simplify the problem. For example, being able to allow you to swipe, just using your thumb, the equivalent of these little business cards for doctors. You can see how it interacts with where they operate or where they practice on a map. And when you pull up a card for a given doctor, you also see the relative experience for that doctor in the conditions that you've searched for. For example, if you are a 35-year-old woman in San Francisco with irritable bowel syndrome, that's the type of thing where if you were to look on our product, we would tell you that this particular physician has way more experience in that than the benchmark or than others. Okay, and then you can also see, almost like the back of a baseball card, relative experience in that, so you see the context of that person's practice. And so that type of context allows you to see not only the directed specific experience for the condition you're looking for, but how does this relate to the rest of that provider's practice. So the information has to feel simple, but give you that context to know that you've done your research. The last thing is that we offer booking an appointment on every doctor in America. And in order to make that work, we also highly personalize that experience. We have to collect a bunch of information from you to make sure that you can do that successfully. And we try to make that delightful too. So when you click book an appointment, the product is almost showered in color, letting you know that you've actually achieved something. And when you fill out information on Amino, like when you need an appointment, what your health insurance is, et cetera, there aren't crazy drop-down menus and really hard to look up codes. You just basically speak in regular language. And any other interactions that we make with you are over text message, which is really, really convenient for people. So everything from how the medium is chosen to how the color choice has been made to what types of information to both directly answer the question but also provide context, all sum up into how we use design to help you make a confident decision.
I'm glad that you shared those components, because something that stood out to me after I used it is when I did my first search, I actually didn't need to find a doctor in that moment, but I just wanted to see how things worked. And it worked so well that it gave me the comfort that I had Amino in my back pocket, that when I needed it or a family member needed it, I knew where to go. I knew it was going to be easy. What are you guys doing to, give me that, oh, all right, everything's okay?
Well, a couple things. One is, anyone who uses our product tends to recommend it to other folks, which is great. I mean, that's primarily what we're focused on, because the leading reason that people find out about a doctor is they ask a friend. And instead of their saying, go see Dr. Smith say use Amino. So anyone who uses our product, we've found, is very, very likely to make sure that others are interested in using that product as well. The second thing that we're doing is we're trying to use our data in ways that tell stories. So in the weeks after our launch, which was only in October, we released an unprecedented story about C-sections in America. And we were able to talk about risk-adjusted C-section rates comparing zip codes, or talking about why there's such a dearth of C-sections on Christmas Day, why you tend to get a C-section on weekdays versus weekends. And if you are a woman who's pregnant, or may be pregnant soon, or was recently pregnant, being able to use a product like ours to be able to understand what your risk of C-section would have been or will be based on certain attributes about you, including your age, whether you have gestational type 1 or type 2 diabetes, malpositioned babies and things like that. We've been able to train products, in addition to finding a doctor, on all of our data. So in that case, we used 4 million deliveries in the US to educate a model on what contributes to a C-section. And so you're able to have a conversation with people to answer questions that are outside of the context of finding a doctor, but help people understand that Amino is based on this data set that's never been used before for this context, and also help them answer questions that add up to, hopefully, when they walk in to use Amino, or when they especially walk into that doctor's office feeling like they have all the information they need to feel like they made the right choice.
And I know that all of this sounds fantastic, and I get to have this feeling when I use the product, but you guys have been working since 2013 in stealth. Like you said, you launched in October. Right. What were some of the early challenges you faced?
Well, I mean, everything that we've described as an achievement started out as a challenge. You start out with this idea that, gosh, it sucks to be me in healthcare. And you start asking why. And so just the research of trying to understand, given the complexities of healthcare, HIPAA privacy, the complex incentives that are in healthcare, how we choose based on referrals versus word of mouth versus these other things. You have to unpack a lot in healthcare because it's an extremely layered industry, both in terms of who participates, who pays whom, why things are the way that they are. So just researching that is significant, and was significant for the first part of our business. Then identifying that we wanted to go after unlocking this data to help people required lots of conversations. We now have on the order of dozens of partnerships with all sorts of sources to help us get access to anonymized health insurance data so that we can use that to help consumers. But to be able to get started in that took months. And then once you have that data, the data is very dirty. And so you start working with simultaneously the people who are trying to understand what questions we need to answer for consumers. So that's where our user experience and design people really started sprinting forward. And then also some really great data science and data engineering work in order to convert what is essentially a set of codes and numbers and bills into telling a story about what actually happened in the doctor's office that day. And so to even just take the raw materials, there's this huge bridge of how you actually get it to tell stories. And so I think we're only at sort of the earliest phase of this journey. So hopefully all of our greatest challenges today will continue to be our greatest achievements tomorrow. But literally everything we've described as something we're incredibly proud of started out as a consternation and a barrier.
And you guys are 24 people right now, right?
We're just above that. We had a couple people accept offers last week.
That's great. Well, congratulations on that.
Thank you very much.
How are you approaching hiring at this point? Because in the beginning, you're just pitching an idea. Year one, hey, this is what we're working on. Now you have a real business, and that business is your baby.
Yes. We're approach hiring in two ways. One is that being out there in the public with our product since October has made a huge difference in being able to recruit people. I cannot tell you how many personal stories arrive in our recruiting inbox in that someone applies to be a healthcare researcher or an engineer and is just saying, I'm motivated by solving the problem more than anything. And so to feel like we have a chance, of doing that is actually what has brought a lot of people to use Amino. So out of the 26, 27 people that are at Amino, only 2 have been recruited through a recruiter. Every
only
single
2?
That's correct. Every single other person has come in unsolicited or through a friendly network, et cetera. And a lot of that is because I think we've got tremendously talented people with whom people want to work. And I think we've got a challenging, scalable, high impact problem that someone could spend a decade on and still feel unfulfilled and focusing on reaching that destination. And so I've worked in a lot of different company contexts, and I've never seen something like this before. So our approach is to continue doing great work, continue doing, telling great stories, and then making sure that people are aware of opportunities like front-end web development or data science or data engineering at Amino. So.
And David, if people are coming in already very excited and passionate about the mission, does that impact your hiring process at all? Do you feel like you're not coming in with a bias, but they're so excited, so you feel excited? How do you step back and remember, hey, it's an interview?
Well, I mean, you're still trying to hire the best, right? So we have a very strong culture here of people who are extremely talented in what they do, but thoughtful, respectful, collaborative. We are not the type of organization that I think would thrive in an environment in which we were just trying to put bodies, in seats. These are hard problems, and we would much rather have people who are very, very high leverage, high throughput people, and who at the same time have been humbled by problems like this and by people around them. I believe that Amino is the only company where you have both user experience and design, health informatics, data science, machine learning, statistics, large big data engineering, business development trying to bring in some of this data, and also consumer communications, content marketing, et cetera. You probably have a little bit of each of those things depending on what company you go to, but I think the diversity of things necessary to make this product successful creates a certain humility in each of us, knowing that we need each of the others in order to be, where we want to be.
Hey, I'm surprised. I think you guys with that would have a lot of free time. There's not that many problems to solve.
Yeah, well, what's amazing about this group is that I think as we've unpacked and sort of peeled away all the different layers to this problem, we've found that there are new solutions, but also ones that require both, to give you an example of this C-section idea, how do you actually communicate the idea of risk adjustment to a consumer? And also, how do you actually do the statistics in a way that is rigorous? And every single one of those conversations is what produces a product like ours, both balancing what you and I would need as essentially novices in healthcare, and hopefully we all remain novices in healthcare, with at the same time trying to make sure that the underlying data and the underlying methodologies are extremely rigorous. So everybody needs to work together at Amino, which is pretty cool.
That's a really interesting way to put it. I'd never thought of it in the sense that the way that you present the data could scare me.
Yeah, I mean, I think the truth is that the decisions that we all make in healthcare are very high impact, and so we take our responsibility very seriously, whether it relates to the privacy of people who use our products and of the underlying data used to create our products, to the types of information and how transparent we are with our methodologies. So if you are a data scientist, or anyone else, you can go to Amino and read the methodologies for how we calculate some of these things. We have an advisory board surrounding Amino that includes the former Chief Privacy Officer and Chief Technology Officer of the Department of Health and Human Services, the heads of health quality research at Stanford and Harvard, a number of other folks who help us make sure that what we're doing is of the highest integrity for people, and that, like everything else here, requires a group effort.
I'm really glad that you mentioned your advisory board, because I was so intrigued and impressed by the group that you've brought together. Why has that been so important for Amino?
Well, I think the thing is, we don't know what we don't know sometimes when we're starting companies like this. We knew when we started Amino that we wanted to have a very consumer-oriented product. And that meant in the early days really staffing ourselves with the DNA that comes at it from solving for a patient first, for a consumer first. But at the same time, you don't know what's around the corner in terms of trying to make sure that what you do does not have any risk of re-identification in the underlying data. So we want to have an expert who understands patient privacy and patient empowerment. And then you run into an issue where it's like, we need a network of people to help us devise quality measures for healthcare. And, we have the ability to create those methodologies, but we'd love to vet them with people who are, renowned OB-GYNs. So George Sawaya, who's on our group, is a fantastic OB-GYN and healthcare researcher out of the UCSF. So as you encounter problems, one of the things that I go back to is that humility in Amino, where we are willing to reach out and recognize that there are problems that we are solving that we could use the benefit of wisdom from others. And so the advisory board that we've assembled comes from this broad set of backgrounds. Udi Manber from Google. He used to run search at Google and at YouTube and at Amazon and Yahoo. He's fantastically supportive of us, but also has really challenged us to think about how do we measure the quality of our search results and how do we build out algorithms that we think can actually support people in their search. And then there's very, very deep specific areas like privacy or gynecological quality measurement, where a particular member of the board has been very, very helpful to us. So that'll be dynamic, and we will continue to add members as we need them as we grow.
David, I want to spend a couple of minutes chatting about your experience as a whole. You started Rent Juice. It was acquired by Zillow. You spent some time at Zillow. Has those experiences informed the way you run Amino?
Absolutely. I think there's a lot of things that I do now that I can point to specific experiences that I've had. In one case, I look at how we've allocated capital and thought about raising money. I don't think about too many decisions that I made at Rent Juice, but one of the ones that really came up was that I did a lot of things myself in the early days of starting that company. I raised small amounts of capital. I continued to pay the AT&T bill myself. I continued to go and look at office space, and I realized that the fixed amount of work that goes into starting a company like this is very high. And if you can actually start to direct yourself at highest value problems as a company, but also as a person, then you're going to get far more leverage on your time. And so I've been really, hopefully, much more effective this time around at understanding what are my true strengths, and then finding people who are expert in certain areas and either outsourcing or delegating internally. And I think that's one of those things that I think makes this, such an important, experience, is that I've been able to do that, and that's why I tell people this couldn't have been my first company. To some extent, there are a lot of ways, a lot of reasons that I would have turned back building this company if I, hadn't had the success of my last, or hadn't had, a bunch of mentors who've helped me throughout the years. As it relates to Zillow, I mean, one of the things that I picked up while there is just an inspiring leadership team that really understood the value of information and empowering people. And I think that ends up being a creed. It ends up being a set of beliefs that you can apply to a product or a company like Amino. And so, our approach at Amino is to, believe that if we help people feel informed, that they will not only make a confident decision today, but like you, that will leave a sort of indelible memory on where they're going to go to and where they're going to go in the future. And that's something that, if you can do very effectively, it is actually a foundation for a strong leading brand in the long run. And so our venture investors, we've raised almost $20 million to build this company, believe in that and are willing to be patient as we build that brand. But these are all decisions, whether it's about delegation and how to raise capital and how to, position a product, that came from really a unique set of experiences building Rent Juice and eventually, being at Zillow.
I'm really glad that you touched on raising capital and using it efficiently, because there was just a quote today from Shamal Palihapitiya about, you shouldn't be buying Kind bars and working in an office right in the middle of Soma. If you can go to Oakland, save your money, don't use the capital. Can you explain how you guys have approached that and why you chose to do that?
Well, the fixed costs of running a business like ours are larger than building out a Twitter app, application, or just a social media monitoring tool. There are very important things that we need to spend money on here. The underlying data, being able to build the systems that process it. These are all things that happen before you can even build a product like the product we've built. So the cold start, if you will, the fixed cost of getting a business like ours up and running is just a little bit different than other companies. The second is that our company is one that we believe will focus on a long-term journey of trying to be a consumer healthcare brand. And that's one where you need, in particular, a large amount of patient capital. We picked a market that, in the long run, we believe is a huge market opportunity to be able to be that trusted ally for consumers in healthcare. But the way that you monetize that and how you think about adding services to this amazing free resource that we provide, that's going to take a while for us to both develop and to, after that, figure out how to monetize. And that's where I think you have to align the type of business that you're building with the type of capital you're raising. If I were building a business that, for example, had a much smaller market, where the market were $100 million or $500 million in terms of total available market spend, then you need to think about how efficiently you should be raising capital, because you don't want to raise so much capital that you put too much risk on the business. So if there are preferences, as there often are in preferred financing, 1x or 2x liquidation preference, if you overcapitalize a business, you may not leave any upside for founders and employees and things like that. So being able to gauge how much capital you should raise for a business relative to the total market opportunity is an important exercise for any entrepreneur. We just happen to believe that with a $3 trillion budget every year in healthcare, that if we can be that sort of trusted resource for consumers, that the market opportunity for us is many, many billions of dollars, but as yet to be determined in terms of what specifically that revenue structure will be.
David, you mentioned a couple of things in that response that led to an insight that another David told me. But you were talking about how you have to be patient. There are a lot of things that are going into this, and the market opportunity is enormous, but you're not going to just bulldoze into it right now. You really need the time to figure it out and to figure out what works. And it reminded me of an insight from David Tisch, who said, you have to fight conformity as a founder. Every time you have an opportunity to hedge a bet in a safe direction or in a direction that you don't believe in, you have to fight it. How has that come true for your team, especially with such an intense problem, to never take that short way, hey, let's just experiment with this simple solution?
Well, you just look at our decision not to have sponsored listing and advertising on our site. The truth is we've already had many practices, physician practices reach out to us saying, hey, how do I pay to get my name at the top of the list or what have you?
Right.
And it just doesn't, you have to stick to what you think are the values of both the founding of the company as well as what you think actually affords the best long-term success. And I think not only is it about the individual values of people, but I think end users, consumers can tell when they feel like the information they're getting has some of that trust eroded because of the effect of those influences. And so we face issues like that all the time. Should we compromise on hiring a particular person because we need that person so badly right now? And yes, they're not a great fit, but we just don't do that. Or should we pick a business model that allows us to get to profitability more quickly? No, we can't do that either. A lot of this comes down to how willing you are to have tough, honest conversations with yourself and with your investors, for example, in saying, hey, how patient are you willing to be? And are you the type of investor who is going to let us figure this out over a period of time? Do you believe in what we're doing, taking into account those long-term bets? And if you can align your interests with your investors or with your other teammates or with your customers and those sorts of things, then that's when you're not going to be making compromises, because you can rely on that agreement that you've made in the past. But all too often, absolutely, starting a company is really, really hard. And if you're just starting to pick up some momentum on something, but it looks like it's a very, very long journey ahead, you may look at a billboard and say, maybe it's time to pull off the road, take a shortcut. But in reality,
I'll paint it myself.
Sometimes it's that full journey that actually what creates the most value. And this is true of anyone from hiring, whether to sell your company, whether to raise capital or how much capital to raise, and the list goes on.
I think all these things, David, they really come down to that evolution as a leader, which you've shared. You've seen some of, maybe not the exact problems, but you've been in situations before. You've responded. You see what works, what doesn't. Have you had any critical shifts in your role and journey as CEO that have helped you grow up?
Oh man, I think I'm growing all the time. I think a big part of doing what I do is having people to talk to. Having a board or having a coach, which I have, who can help me sort of see my own.
Telling me that.
Yeah, help me see my own biases, what he calls my autopilot, and trying to fight that. Because I think to be a full leader, you have to probably be a balance of what you're really good at and what you tend to do. And also some of the things that you're naturally going to avoid, because none of us are a 100%, complete, a package. And so the things that have evolved for me, as I mentioned earlier, is the amount of delegation that I'm more comfortable doing. Another thing that I've been really, really excited about is that, I think I've been a little bit more able to take more specific calculated risks by understanding how to find specific metrics that align with what we're trying to achieve. Whereas I think, in your first company, you're really just, thinking that you're always having to do things for the first time. No one's ever done something like what you're doing before. And the truth is that, markets are very much structured very similarly. And, even other companies that are doing things in totally different spaces can be tremendous sources of insight and tremendous sources of shortcuts for you to be able to see around that corner. And I've either seen that from other CEOs that I've gotten to know or from our advisory board or those sorts of things. And so to be able to make that transition into knowing that not every problem that I've encountered is the first time that it's existed is a huge sort of mind shift, paradigm shift that I'm very excited I've been able to achieve over the last couple of years.
I think that's a big one for anyone listening, and certainly for me. Sometimes I encounter a problem, I'm like, I'm sure no one else has dealt with something not working on the website, and people deal with these problems every day.
That's right. And that's the type of thing that creates calm when you're looking at your cash balance deplete. It's the type of thing that allows you to, I think, stay sober when you're trying to figure out a solution. And it's, I think, the kind of thing that allows you to reach a solution far more quickly because you're more open to talking to someone else about it.
I love that. And David, before we go, I just want to ask you 3 more questions that are not serious. We always end with more fun questions.
Okay.
If you could go on the ultimate vacation right now, all inclusive, all paid for,
wow.
Where would you get on the plane to? Like right now, like you'd leave this interview and you'd go.
I'd probably go to Cabo. It was a discovery for me. Actually, when I got engaged a few years ago, I got engaged in Cabo, and we had such a wonderful experience. And literally my wife and I, basically anytime we really just need to sort of hit the ejector button, it's usually on a flight down to Mexico, and hopefully I can have a margarita in my hand and some music in the background and watch a sunset, and all of a sudden I've completely decompressed. So it usually takes me about 24 hours or so, but if I can at least get a weekend in, I kind of come back completely refreshed.
All right, I'll do my best to make it happen.
Yeah.
Last question. What's one question that you've always wanted to be asked, personal, professional, athletic achievement from when you were 7, that nobody's ever asked you?
Wow. I think the question that I've always wanted to answer was, why do I do this? Why do I build companies? And, I think the reason I say that is because I really do think that every single person's rationale has to be a little bit different because we're all wired completely differently. And it gets to a very basic idea for me, which is that, I have a tremendous imagination. I just have, when I think of entrepreneurship, I actually think of being kind of alone in my room as a kid and just like creating such wild, stories. And I remember doing more than just sort of thinking about stories. I used to be into, for example, professional wrestling and into, Star Wars and things like that. And, the whole experience of creating those things, I would write articles about what happened inside of my fake world. And so I think a lot of why I start companies is because it's this tremendous belief that if you actually can visualize something, that through a handshake and an email and a promise and hard work and then, some tough negotiating and real world things, you can actually create an imagined world. And that to me is just this incredibly empowering thing. And I think that contributes also to when I'm most frustrated, which is when that visualization, that ideal world that you've kind of created for yourself is not within reach because you're not moving as fast as you need, or because you didn't get that hire that you were excited about, or capital's taking longer to raise. And so for me, entrepreneurship is about, trying to create that imagined world. And it feels cool to be able to connect some of the really basic things that kind of inspired me when I was a kid to some of the little bit more complex things that I'm doing as an adult, but are still just as tickling.
Wow, what a way to end. Thank you.
Thanks.
It's been a pleasure to spend time with you today to learn about your work and your journey. For everyone who wants to continue the conversation with you and follow Amino, what's the best way for them to do that, David?
Well, I'm on Twitter as David Vivero, Vivero, and at amino.com you can see all of our products, but also find additional ways to follow us, whether it's on Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter. Our Twitter handle is Amino Health.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.